Hi everyone. Okay, so we're doing problem number 4 on the phase change day 1 worksheet. And in this problem, I'm graphing y is equal to 5 cosine of theta plus pi over 3. So first thing I want to find is the amplitude. And I can see that this value in front of cosine gives me the amplitude of 5. So I'm going to write amp is 5. Okay, next I want to look for my period. So the period is always determined by 2 pi over b, and b is always the coefficient that's in front of theta. So notice since there's no coefficient in front, we can assume that it's a 1, which means that the period is 2 pi. Okay, next I want to figure out where my critical values are going to be. So I know that my critical values occur at every quarter of my period. So it's going to be 2 pi divided by 4. So I'm going to write critical values are at 2 pi over 4. So every pi over 2. Okay. Next I have to find my phase change, my shift. So phase shift here is going to be determined by the value that's either being added or subtracted inside of my input of cosine. So theta plus pi over 3, that pi over 3 is going to be my shift. Now remember, this value changes sign when we're finding the phase shift. So the shift is going to be negative pi over 3. Okay, and then I want to find my starting point. So my starting point is going to be the point negative pi over 3. And it's cosine, so we're thinking, okay, what's the value of cosine at the very beginning of my graph? So when theta is equal to 0. So if this whole input is 0, then the cosine of 0 is 1. And then I'm going to multiply it by 5. So it's going to be negative pi over 3 comma 5 is where I'm starting. Okay, so now I have to figure out where my different intervals are going to go. So I know that I'm starting at my starting point, which is negative pi over 3. And I know that my critical values occur at every pi over 2. So first what I'm going to do is I'm going to start at negative pi over 3, and I want to add pi over 2 over and over and over and over and over again to outline where all of my critical values are going to be. So the way that I add, this value here and this value here together is I need a common denominator. So I know that pi over 2 and negative pi over 3 have a common denominator of 6. So I'm going to rewrite negative pi over 3 as negative 2 pi over 6. And then over here I'm going to write pi over 2 as 3 pi over 6. And now I can do the addition much easier. So I'm going to start my graph again at negative pi over 3. So I'm going to write, instead of negative pi over 3, I'm going to write negative 2 pi over 6. And then I'm going to continually add 3 pi over 6 to this. So going forward, I'm going to have pi over 6, right, when I add 3 pi over 6. And then I'm going to have 4 pi over 6. This is my starting point, by the way, so let's put a box around that. And then I'm going to add 3 pi over 6 again, and I get 7 pi over 6. And I'm going to add 3 pi over 6 again, I get 10 pi over 6. Okay, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's one whole period right here. Now we have the choice to either go forwards or to go backwards. So I think I'm going to go backwards here because I'm already negative, so I might as well keep going. So now we're going to go to our negative period. So I'm at negative 2 pi over 6, and then I'm going to subtract an additional 3 pi over 6. So that's going to give me negative 5 pi over 6, then negative 8 pi over 6, And then negative 11 pi over 6. And I have 1, 2, 3. I need 4, so one more. And then negative 14 pi over 6. Okay, next thing I'm going to do is simplify. So 10 pi over 6, that's going to simplify to 5 pi over 3. 7 pi over 6 is good. 4 pi over 6 simplifies to 2 pi over 3. Pi over 6 is fine. Negative 2 pi over 6 simplifies to negative pi over 3. 5 pi over 6 is good. Negative 8 pi over 6 simplifies to negative 4 pi over 3. This one is fine, and then this one is negative 7 pi over 3. Okay, so next I want to graph these values. So I'm going to start by looking at my graph, and this is just the x-axis. So we're going to also have to graph a y-axis here at some point. But first I'm just going to see, okay, I have to go negative and positive, basically almost the same amount. So I'm going to start somewhere towards the center, and I'm going to start at negative pi over 3. So I'm just going to call this one negative pi over 3. And then I'm going to count by 3s. So here I'm going to go left 3, and then I'm going to call this negative 5 pi over 6. Keep going to the left, another 3. 1, 2, 3. And that's going to be negative 4 pi over 3. I want to make sure we use the simplified one. And then negative 11 pi over 6 is next. And then negative 14 pi over 6. Okay, next I'm going to move forward. So I know that I'm going to go 3 spaces again. This is going to be pi over 6. 3 spaces again. This is 2 pi over 3. 3 spaces again. This is going to be 7 pi over 6. And 3 spaces again. And that's 5 pi over 3. By the way, this one over here, instead of negative 14 pi over 6, it should be negative 7 pi over 3. We want to use the most simplified version. And I think everything else looks good. Okay, so I'm going to circle the negative pi over 3 because I know that's where my graph starts. And then I want to draw my y-axis. So my y-axis is going to go somewhere between this negative pi over 3 and pi over 6 because it's going to occur at 0. So it's actually going to be right here. And then I'm going to count up by 5 and down by 5 because that's my amplitude. And now I'm going to start actually graphing. So here, I know that my first initial value is going to be negative pi over 3 comma 5. So I'm going to go all the way up to 5 at negative pi over 3. Now cosine, because it's positive cosine, is going to start at, a positive value, and then it's going to come down. So the next critical value is going to be here at pi over 6. Notice that it skips 0. 0 is not one of my critical values at all. So, and then I'm going to go down 5 and over here, and then back to 0, and then up 5 again over here. And in this case, I'm going to go backwards, so I'm going to continue just making dots at where all of my critical values are. And then I'm going to draw my curve. This is the tough part. Okay. Almost done. And there's 2 periods of my cosine. So the first one starts here, goes down and up, and the other one starts here and goes left and back up. So I can see 2 full periods of my cosine graph and with a phase shift of negative pi over 3. And we're done.